Hello everyone, welcome. My name is James. I'm the founder of BlockByte Capital. We help clients, wholesale clients, invest in Bitcoin and digital assets, as well as provide insured custody. And today I'm going to be speaking with Diana Rodriguez. Diana runs a company called Nani Crypto. She helps educate clients on the basics of cryptocurrency, but also how to invest and trade and self-custody securely. And Dan has been running Nani Crypto now for a few years. She's been in the space helping clients for over 5 years, has around 15,000 followers across all social media channels. And so Dana, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really cool to be on your podcast today.
Yeah, pleasure. So Dana, if you were a listener to today's episode, who would you say this is going to most appeal to in terms of, is it somebody who's a trader? Is it somebody who's relatively new to cryptocurrency? Who would this appeal to, do you think?
You'd be surprised, James. This is the kind of episode that I think should appeal to everyone, because whether you are crypto curious, beginner, or advanced in crypto, there are a lot of steps that are skipped along the way when it comes to having the fundamentals that you should have in the crypto space. So I think it's for everyone to, maybe if you've been here for a while, maybe jot down some of those fundamentals, but if you're new, definitely a great place to start.
Great. And so just quickly before we get into your background, which we'd like to do, could you just tell us what are sort of the biggest mistakes people that are new to investing in cryptocurrency make when they start getting into this space?
It's probably easy if I share a little bit of my journey, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but a lot of the mistakes that I made early on was due to that lack of education. So you end up finding simple things like what I call simple these days, but if you're going to send something from A to B, if you don't know what asset you're sending, what blockchain you're sending it on, and I may be getting a bit technical, but those are things that if I say that and it doesn't make sense to you, that means you're missing some of the fundamentals. The other really important part is understanding that while being involved in crypto, I think, is a great thing because it is that opportunity to be your own bank and control your own assets. That now means that you are responsible for that. So you have to make sure that self-custody, keeping your seed words, and everything that we need to do to keep our assets safe is now all on us. So it is really important to understand that self-custody, get educated on the security that you need to take and the steps that you need to ensure that your assets are safe. And third and finally, just remember that you can't control what the market does. You can only control what you do. So don't get taken away by the FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, or the FUD, which is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which sometimes leads people to make decisions that they haven't clearly thought about.
So I think leading into your background and experience, I guess you went through a similar journey when starting out. How did you get into digital assets to begin with, and what kind of mistakes did you make initially, and how did you rectify those mistakes and sort of learn?
Yeah, so I've been in crypto now for 8+ years, which seems like a lifetime ago considering it's now my full-time journey. When I first started, it was all about buy Bitcoin, and I said, buy what? I actually didn't even know what Bitcoin was, had never actually heard about it. And just to get started, the mistakes was within the first couple of months, I bought a couple of Bitcoin. No, I don't still have it. I put it on a platform I knew nothing about, didn't do my research, didn't have any kind of plan moving forward, and I lost those assets very quickly, which is a very costly mistake if you think about what Bitcoin's worth these days. But that was one of those things very early on in the journey where I made the mistake. Now, I'm an IT consultant by trade, so I'm a programmer. So I'm a geek at the best of times, right? So there's a lot of information from my journey as an IT consultant that led me to educate myself, and somehow I didn't think that was important. I don't know why. Again, probably because of the hype. So I skipped that education space for a while I started losing out because of following hypes, buying what everybody else told me to buy, and those kind of things. Once I realized I was serious about it, and I'm like, this is actually could make a significant impact in my life. And I tried to do the education. There wasn't really a lot of information out there. A lot of it was very technical, high level. Think about it, learning a new language. Imagine if you tried to learn a new language and none of it made sense. No subtitles, nothing for you to understand about the crypto space. That's when I realized there was a real, I guess, gap in the market to help people get educated.
And now if somebody's coming into cryptocurrency, I would say that there's an abundance or almost over information. So how does somebody, new to the space navigate just the vast quantity of information? Like what kind of structure do you take your clients through so that they can, feel that they're not being overwhelmed?
Yeah, to say the space is intimidating and overwhelming is probably an understatement. There is a lot of information in crypto, and just before I get into what I do, one of the other things that people forget is kind of get into crypto, do one thing and then leave it and forget it. It is an ever evolving space, and I think it will be for a while. I guess if you think about crypto, we are in the baby steps. We are just getting started. So you need to make sure you keep up to date and educated in this space. When it comes to my clients, one of the things Nani Crypto has been known for is to make it simple, hands-on, practical, and accessible to everybody, which means it doesn't matter if you've never looked at a chart and you want to start trading. It doesn't matter if you've never bought crypto and you want to buy your first Bitcoin. You might even decide to do it in very small amounts. That's fine too. We make sure we are simple, again, practical. It's very hands-on, and we will guide you every single step of the way. And of course, at the same time, make sure you have the fundamentals that you need moving forward so you don't make mistakes like, unfortunately, we had to, which hopefully you'll learn from.
And so, let's say that I'm a new client of yours. What's the first steps that somebody should be doing when they've opened their laptop computer, they're hopefully speaking to Nani Crypto. What is the first thing? Is it, okay, we need to get across some of the key jargon busting terms here to understand what the language is, or, here's how an exchange works. What's the process, or does those first steps look like?
I think you've touched on something really important here, James, and that is that a lot of people, when they get into the space, the first step is open a laptop and buy Bitcoin. That is the biggest mistake you can make. Not because buying Bitcoin is a bad idea, of course, not financial advice, but because you shouldn't be buying anything until you understand the fundamentals. There are 5 things that everybody should be able to do before you even buy your first Bitcoin. Understand how to buy, sell, send, receive, and store. Now, I know that sounds very simple, but it can be quite complex when you start looking at the different wallets, the different types of assets. How do I send? What do I need to look for? How do I store it? Where do I store my secret? There is a lot of information that goes into, and when you're looking at those first steps, James, we do start with the jargon, of course. Let's understand the basics, and then we go into some of those absolute fundamentals required in this space.
Gotcha. And so, when somebody understands the general process for buy, sell, and eventually storing the cryptocurrency, how do you determine what assets somebody should buy? Again, this isn't financial advice, but how do you determine the difference between, let's say, a very high quality token and one that would be a pretty bad investment?
Believe it or not, that's even a simple step forward, because what we do at Nani Crypto is we sit down with you and we say, okay, what is your goal? What are you looking for? Are we looking for trading? Are we looking for long-term generational wealth? Like, it really depends on each person that comes through Nani Crypto, depending on what they want to do. Now, as you said, we do not give financial advice, but we go through some of those assets and go, okay, so these are our top 10, for example, 10 in coin market cap right now, based on market cap. What are they? What do they mean? What kind of utility do they have? And even then, we actually walk our clients through the steps that they need or that they can have, little checklists to go, okay, this is what I'm going to look for when I'm deciding what to buy. One of the things that I do remind people in this space, and I say it because as a TikTok content creator, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and one of the most common things is, I'm going to tell you what the next 100x is going to be. I can tell you now, nobody has a crystal ball, and meme coins are some of the hardest coins to buy and sell. The reason for that is by the time it hits your desk or it crosses your phone as you're scrolling, the market's already bought in and they're just about to dump that asset. Hence, some of those amazing meme coins that have been out there, and a lot of people have lost significant amounts because of that. So just be very wary when it comes to choosing those assets you are going to be holding for the long term.
I wanted to ask you about the current market and what you're seeing. So since October, where there was this quite significant, largest liquidation event in the whole
10th
history
of October,
of,
yes.
the famous 10-10 event. The market's been pretty much down, and Bitcoin dropped as low as around 60,000 US dollars, and it's been hovering sort of between that 65 to 70k range now for a couple of months, with a lot of the smaller altcoins down significantly further. Meme coins, as you mentioned, have been absolutely smashed. So what's your view in terms of the current state of the cryptocurrency market? Do you think that people have been burned and they're kind of gone for good, or do you think there's going to be another altcoin market, and this is kind of just part of the way crypto works, where it tends to jump up every few years and then crashes down?
That was a lot in that question, but let me try and see if I can remember everything you said, and I'll try and answer it. So when it comes to markets, again, I can't control what the markets do, and you never can. Just remember that. And that's really important, because people freak out and then the markets dip, they panic sell, and we even teach people how to do that. I guess because I've been in this space for 8+ years now, this is my third cycle. Now, if I look at the first two cycles, the cycles were very much, I'm not going to say predictable, but to a certain extent, they were following a very nice pattern, and you kind of knew what would happen next. You never knew how much it would go up or down, but it's kind of like, oh yes, we're now due for a pullback, or yes, we're now due for it to go up. That kind of concept. The one thing I've noticed in the last cycle is it was very different to the last two. We have to take into some new factors. Things like institutional money has obviously increased significantly. The amount of people investing via ETFs increased significantly. And the reality is, whether we like it or not, all this outside noise, I'm talking, obviously, we don't want to go into that, but things like tariffs in the US, talk of war, and everything like that is affecting the market. So those are kind of the things out there, if you will, as far as what the market's doing and what my thoughts are. Now, in the current market, as in right now, what are my thoughts? Great buying opportunity. That's what I'm doing. Again, not financial advice. That's just what I'm doing. I'm buying the dip because, as James said, there are a lot of assets out there that have gone down significantly. Like, I can't think of any at the top of my head because I didn't bring assets to my head right now. But as you can imagine, there are assets that we would have bought at $200-$300 and now sitting at $100 or under. So it's a great buying opportunity. And not just buying anything, but having a clear plan of what you want to buy. So when it comes to current markets, I don't panic sell, and I haven't done that for a very long time. What I do is I have some USDT on the sidelines, which are stable coins, and that's what I use to get back into the market. Now, what I think will happen is there will be this kind of sideways movement. Hopefully we don't get under that 60k mark again, and then it will go sideways and then it will go back up. What that will mean inevitably for altcoins is that they will go up eventually. So have a plan, and this is what I say to everyone. You need to decide what you're going to do. If the market takes off and we see a Bitcoin at $200,000, do you have a plan? Do you know what you're going to do? Because maybe you would have realized that over the last 8 years you'd forgot to take profit, which I think should be in everybody's strategy plan. If it goes sideways for the next 6 months, do you have a plan? And what happens if we do see Bitcoin at 30,000? What are you going to do? I think once that plan is laid out and you're not reacting to the market but just following your plan, it makes it so much easier to decide what you're going to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. And once somebody has a plan and they're looking at holding Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in a wallet, how do you go about selecting the right wallet, or what's the optimal custody solution from self-custody to holding it on an exchange, and what's the difference and sort of which is better?
Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about a few important things here when it comes to self-custody and keeping your assets. Probably one of my most golden rules is never keep your assets on an exchange long term. The reality is that exchanges have a huge target on their back, and they are the ones that the hackers will come at first. So just be very wary that I hold assets on an exchange to do trading, but definitely not the stuff that I'm kind of holding long term. So that's from that standpoint. The second most important thing is have your own self-custody. Now, there are a lot of options out there. I'm a big fan of Tangem just because it's so simple and easy to use. Huge fan of it. Been using it for a couple of years. There are other options out there. So just find which one suits your needs best. And when I say your needs best, if you want to hold 10 assets, make sure that those assets are available in whatever cold wallet that you use. Do you want to maybe have access to that wallet and not have to use a device? Then you might want to choose a soft wallet. And again, these are just a few of the questions that we help guide you through when you're deciding when you're going to keep those. Now, third and finally, I want to point out, mostly because of the people who are listening to us today, is that while don't keep it on an exchange is definite no, keep it on self-custody is a must in my books. I do understand that there are people who don't feel very confident in moving assets around and holding them and having, I guess, that responsibility. And that's when you should look for things like trusted platforms like brokers that will actually help you out in that situation and hold your assets, because there are a few out there that can definitely do that for you.
Yeah, I should say as well, even though we run a brokerage here at BlockByte, we actively encourage self-custody as well. I think it's always optimal to have a certain portion that you keep for the long term, where it's part of an inheritance or an estate plan, and you don't want to be tied to any single entity. But for people that like to move in and out a little bit more frequently, self-custody can introduce a couple of more steps in a process that can make it less convenient, but the trade-off is generally much higher security as long as you've put the right steps in place, obviously. In terms of just, double clicking on the self-custody component, you mentioned Tangem as an example. What does that look like? How does somebody, take self-custody, let's say, of their Bitcoin? What's involved? What do they have to do? And what happens if, that person dies unexpectedly? How do they make sure that, family and friends, whoever's in their will, if they've got a will, hopefully, can access that Bitcoin?
One of the things, it's a little bit of a missing step when I first started. One of the parts of my education journey is I'm part of a DBM Academy in the UK. Now, the reason I mention that because they have this great product called the ICE, and it's basically an in case of emergency document where you make sure you have everything written down in regards to crypto. Now, remember, we don't want to take screenshots of seed words and post digital documents. Everything needs to be written down. So it's a great document. I really recommend anybody who's looking into that kind of self-custody. And again, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So making sure that you have documents in place, steps in place, whether that's a will, whether it's a document that tells someone how to do that. Now, the great thing about Tangem is it's a card, and it's 3 cards. So what you do is you tap that card on your phone and that gives you access to your assets. But it's 3 cards. We started, imagine what it's like for maybe a family member who still doesn't understand what I do as a crypto coach, but they're kind of trying to figure out how to read this document, right? So you need to make sure it's clear, it's got a step-by-step. So again, whether you have a will or a document like this, I think it really helps people out in a case of an emergency.
Yeah, I gotcha. So I've got a wife who also owns Bitcoin and invests in digital assets. It wasn't a prerequisite, but she just so happens to.
A bonus, I guess.
That's definitely a bonus. In terms of cryptocurrency, it's generally skewed towards men, or young men in particular. We're starting to see that shift now into older demographics, more people putting digital assets in their superannuation, but also we're seeing more women adopt and hold digital assets. So just wanted to ask a 2-part question. Firstly, what's driving that sort of shift in demographics, do you think? And then secondly, what are the barriers that still remain that need to be sort of taken down so that we can have a more broad-based adoption of digital assets?
Yes, I've definitely been, maybe not directly affected, but heard a lot about women who are intimidated and overwhelmed because of the lack of information or education out there. And they're finding it quite difficult to get started. As we've said before, getting started in this space, you have to decide to take that step, but it is quite difficult, as in where is the right place to go, if you will. I think with women, because of and this is not just in crypto, as we know, there's been long-going discussions going about women empowerment and how we need to have diverse voices. Just recently, we did an International Women's Day in Sydney, and it was all about that, empowering women and allowing them to be seen and heard. So when it comes to education in this space, I feel that we need to give them an avenue so that they have a safe space to speak. I think that's really important. And when it comes to women, I say, go out there, give it a go, find someone that you trust, someone that you connect with, build the education that you need, because financial sovereignty and the kind of generational wealth that I believe people will get from crypto isn't just for men. It's for anybody out there, young and old, who wants to make a difference in their lives. Now, you touched on SMSF, and I think that's an important part of this conversation, because a lot of people, me included, didn't want to go down that route because, again, it is so complicated. So just know that there are, again, trusted platforms, trusted businesses out there that can help you through this journey. And I think that's really going to give women some peace of mind when they don't have to do it themselves and they have someone who can help them on that journey.
Yeah, gotcha. And so you mentioned giving women sort of a space where they can ask questions more openly. Do you think it's, the lack of those spaces or other women to talk to? Or do you think it's been, has there been any other drivers you think as to why, women haven't got as involved? I mean, that is shifting quite rapidly. Is it more, generalizing here, of course, but is it due to more risk aversion, or is it due to, I saw you published a chart recently on underemployment in across male and females. That's kind of shifting now, where we're seeing more employment and less underemployment in the female demographic. Do you think as those trends are shifting, women have got more economic power, and therefore we're seeing more involvement, more ability to take risks?
I think there's a few things we need to remember. Firstly, as an IT consultant, I've been in a room when I've been the only female. And that, while maybe at first was kind of a bit daunting, I'm used to it now. So that's something that I've been dealing with my whole career. It was funny that you mentioned the meetups, because, for example, I attended a Bitcoin Sydney event. This was last year. I hadn't really attended one of these before. And I walked into a room of, let's just say 50 people, and there was 2 women. Me and someone's girlfriend, who was there more of a, oh, just come with me because we're here, not really to listen to the conversation. But here is what I found. Now, had I been a crypto curious that showed up at one of these events, I would have probably understood about 10% of it. So I still think that the conversations need to be simplified. I understand that some of these rooms are very high-level technical conversations about the development, the blockchain, and all these talks that are being had. I'm not saying they're not important. Absolutely they are, and there needs to be rooms for that. But the one room that seems to consistently come up empty is the room of come in and let's talk. Ask the questions where you can be seen. Ask the questions where no one's going to judge you, where it doesn't matter if I have to explain it in 3 different ways, I'm happy to do that. Those rooms, for women or otherwise, it isn't only women, but I find that those rooms are consistently empty, and I find that's what they're having such a difficult time, that they showed up to these meets, they don't understand it and never come back. Or there's no one coming up to them going, hi, nice to see you. How long have you been in crypto? Do you have any questions? Like that kind of just networking conversation is really missing. The other thing when it comes to women is, and I think I might have read this somewhere, where they talk a lot about, I guess, men in the family context. They're usually the ones dealing with the financials. So, men take care of that and they do the numbers, and that's never been the case in my personal life. But because it is the case, they kind of go, I don't need to know about this. I invite women to come because guess what? This isn't just about family wealth. This is about personal wealth. This is about your kids' wealth. Again, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, the generational wealth that I believe will come from someone being involved in crypto is real. And I've seen it in my own journey. So don't think that because maybe you don't run the numbers or you don't understand it yet, that doesn't mean you can't involve. There's definitely a space here. And that's one of the things that Nani Crypto is focusing on, some of these events that we're doing around Sydney.
And just on the topic of generational wealth transfer that you mentioned, I've seen several reports put out recently that, there's anywhere from $2 to $5 trillion expected to be handed down from the retiring, I think boomer generation is not the right term. It is technically the baby boomers, to hand it down to millennials and Gen Zs. As part of that sort of transition of wealth, are you speaking to any young people as well? So, people that are sort of 16, 17, 18 years old, or do you find that they're pretty across crypto, or are they just busy doing other stuff?
So my daughter's 21. So what are they? Gen X? I think they are. Are they Gen X? I don't know what they are. Anyway, no, I'm a Gen X. She would be a millennial, I think. Is that right?
Maybe a Gen Z.
But the way I see it when it comes to younger, look, I truly believe that crypto education should start from very early on. Now, Nani Crypto was extremely busy last year. We had quite a few events. Obviously, we were at the Australian Crypto Convention. We've been doing a lot of online stuff, but I do want to see if there is an opportunity to go out there and actually start with, say, the high schools. Why not go out and talk to people about what the opportunities are? What does it mean? Is it just dad that needs to look at it? Is this just something that I look at? I find that the younger generation may hear about it, but kind of go, oh, I don't need to worry about that, or that isn't for me. Honestly, if we had known about it when we were 18, it'd be a very different story right now. So yes, I think it's definitely, I'm not doing it at this stage, I've already started reaching out even to universities to see what kind of collab we can do with unis and high schools to get the conversation happening with the younger generation as well.
How do you think about risk in digital assets, and what comes to mind just on the back of speaking about Gen Zs and young people is that there's been a bit of a what you could call a K-shaped economy where the baby boomers have a property, 2 properties, 3 properties. And inflation has really been, their best friend in the sense that asset prices have gone up significantly.
Yep.
And for people that are looking to get on the property ladder or, build wealth outside of property because they can't afford the prices, I think they look to crypto. They're looking at how they can build things with AI these days. How do you think about managing risk, or how should somebody think about managing risk in cryptocurrency so that, if they've not got $1 million to invest, they also have to think about the return that they're going to get on something as well, right? So 2% return on $1,000 of spare cash isn't really going to cut it. So how do you think about having those conversations?
Again, I love your questions. Like you're asking and my brain's going, so that's okay. So when we start with risk, there's a couple of things we need to think about. While yes, obviously property investment is a part of a lot of people's portfolios, and that's great. Just remember that with property, while yes, that asset will increase in value, you won't get that return until that property is sold, correct? And that's something you need to keep in mind, because a lot of people go, oh, well, I've got this property and it's increased, 20, 30%. And I'm like, but unless you sell it, oh, but I don't want to sell it. Well, then you're not going to get that return. That's something you can't really set it off by bits, right? That's something we need to remember. When it comes to crypto, not only can you dollar cost average, and what I mean by that is you can buy $10 worth once a week, once a month, once a quarter, but basically it allows you to build an asset. You don't have to have, as James mentioned, we're sitting at about 65,000 at the moment per Bitcoin. You don't have to have that amount of money to buy Bitcoin. You can start with small amounts. So that's really important. Knowing that you can slowly build your digital assets is, I think, an important part that some people forget. Now, when it comes to the risk, remember that diversification needs to be important. And I don't just mean just within crypto, I mean within your portfolio. So you may decide to have property, and you might decide to have crypto. You might even decide to have some gold, silver. Yeah. So making sure that that portfolio is diverse, I think, is really important. Again, diversification amongst the actual assets. So for example, a Bitcoin maximalist will say, you have to buy Bitcoin and only Bitcoin. I'm a big fan of going, well, I'm going to have a bit of Bitcoin, a bit of ETH. Again, diversification is important. And probably the last thing I would say about this conversation is when it comes to the risk, there is one rule that no matter what you say stands in crypto. Never invest more than you can afford to lose. Because the reality is that I can't control the market, but if I'm there's a word that they use, you're overcompensated. I don't know if that's the word that they use, but they
leveraged.
say over-leveraged, correct? In the market, then when the market goes down and say you put, and I'm going to exaggerate here, say you put $1 million into crypto, and that $1 million, think about it, we're now down 50% from the top of the market. So that $1 million is now worth 500,000. Someone would be panicking, and that's when you don't have your plan that I mentioned, and you end up panic selling. But if you don't invest more than you can afford to lose, then it shouldn't matter what the market does. You've got your plan going because Nani Crypto has helped you set that up. That you should be okay to move forward and not freak out when the market does pull back, as it will during the different cycles of the market.
Have you found any of your clients or maybe people that aren't your clients having a bit of a freak out at the moment, or have you managed to keep people relatively calm during this pullback?
So as I mentioned, James, it's actually my third cycle. And the first cycle, I was more focusing on my education than I was focusing on other people's education. So by the second one, I was obviously out there fully educating. And yes, I got quite a bit of, and it's not even pushback, just I guess, but you told me and I thought, and that kind of conversation. Even family members who decided to maybe purchase crypto at that point, I would hear from them, but you said, but right, this cycle has been very different. And I think that just shows that Nani Crypto isn't just about getting rich overnight. It never has been. It's more about building the wealth. And what you do that when you've done the education, the mindset is a big part of that. So when we're working with our clients, again, while the education is important, once you focus on that mindset, you don't worry about what the market does. Again, why? Because we have a plan, we're educated, we know where we're going to go. The market pulling back is just normal. So I don't think I've received one message this pullback, even though it's been that drop that we had on the 10th of October that you were mentioning has been the biggest drop we've had in crypto history. I did not get one person messaging me saying, what am I doing? I'm freaked out. I don't know what to do, which I guess means the strategy is working and people are definitely following it.
Which is good. Excellent.
Yes.
In terms of, looking out over the next 10 years is a long time, but how do you see cryptocurrency evolving from what it is today? And if I could just, describe the situation today, at least in Australia, is we've got roughly 25% of the population have adopted, at least temporarily, or continue to hold digital assets, according to Independent Reserve's latest research. And so we've got 75% of the population that are still on the investing sidelines. We've also got, increasing adoption where you can use digital assets at the payment terminal, but that's pretty rare. And I have to be honest as well, even though I'm big on digital assets, I don't want to spend my crypto, even if it promotes adoption of the space. Like for me, it's an asset that's going up. Unless it's a stable coin, of course, then sure, happy to spend that. But there's talk about tokenization of real world assets. I don't see anybody yet wanting to token. I know there are examples, of course, but I'm not seeing that widespread yet here in Australia. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on how does this space change over the next five years plus?
Look, I think one of the big things, not just in Australia, but worldwide, and we're seeing some of it coming through in the US, is crypto regulation is important. I think it will build trust with the people who still think it's only for the dark web, or that's what you do and it's a scam and all of that. And that will, I think, take us eventually to mainstream, right? And I think that's important. The amount of different businesses that are now using blockchain. Now, I know you mentioned not wanting to spend your crypto, and obviously I do that as well. But at the same time, because I actually get paid in crypto. Believe it or not, I use my Crypto.com card and I actually get cashbacks in crypto, which then increase in value. How awesome is that? So the reality is that people will stop thinking it's just an asset to hold for life, I believe, and they will start going, okay, I can actually use this asset. I can pay my petrol with it. I can pay groceries with it. I can go and take cash out of an ATM. I can send assets. So I'm originally from South America and I can actually send assets to my family. Simple, no bank involved, receives within a couple of minutes. And I think the amount of utility, just seeing even crypto coming into your everyday financial systems, is going to make a big impact and change to where crypto goes over the next 5 to 10 years.
And again, not financial advice. You'd probably hear that 10 times on any crypto podcast episode. But if you had to make a fun guess, just for fun, as to where Bitcoin would be 5 years from now, what would your guess be?
Above 500,000.
Above 500,000 US?
Yes.
Okay, so that's like an 8-fold increase from where we are today.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. And I think you touched on this earlier, but what do you think is going to be the main reason, or say the main couple of reasons as to why we go from 65,000 to 500,000?
I think people are going to stop, again, believing the bad stuff that they've heard about crypto in the past. They're going to start seeing it, whether it's in people that they know, whether it's an ad. If you, for example, on Formula One this weekend, you saw Crypto.com everywhere. And there was even other businesses, OKX was on shirts and things like that, where people are going to go, I want to know what that's about. So obviously some of this ad that's being sent out via socials, via the different platforms, I think they're going to start going, well, if somebody like Formula One, even the Australian Open did it this year with Nexo, if someone like Formula One and the Australian Open are saying, yes, we'll take you as sponsors, these are obviously trusted businesses. What do? Actually, they're involved in crypto, and they, for example, Nexo allows you to stake your assets and even has it like a lending platform. Obviously, Crypto.com allows you to stake, earns you cashbacks. So they're going to realize that they want to be a part of this. And I think obviously what they're doing is big. Think about the Lakers stadium becoming the Crypto.com arena, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, again, when it comes to some of the influencers that I'm seeing on TikTok, for example, which I have a big following on, we're building community, but we're also doing collabs because, again, there are different things going on in different parts of the world that are showing crypto as the next best thing, right? So that is me being my own bank. People are going to get tired of the bank going, wait a second, do you want to spend your 10,000K? You have to tell me why, and what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, wait, what? This is my assets. I've spent years building this foundation. Now you're telling me you're trying to control what I do with my money. In crypto, you are your own bank. It's a BYOB. Be your own bank. Now that means you need to get educated. That means you need to make sure you keep secure your assets, and you need to know how to do that. But people are going to, you know what? I'm sick and tired of getting what's bank returns these days? I don't know, 0.1% a year, and they're going to maybe look at stable coins staking. They're going to look at, maybe I need to look at trading. Maybe I need to look at how I build this wealth so that I can then put it to work. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think people are going to start seeing not just the hype of buy Bitcoin, but what this opportunity and this space offers for other people to get involved in.
Yeah, I agree. And at the moment, it's a bit of an interesting fight in the US trying to pass this Clarity Act legislation. And one of the main holdups at the moment is that the banking lobby groups don't want crypto companies to offer yield on stablecoins. And I found out, in Australia, if you deposit money into your CBA or your NAB account, you can earn at least a few percentage points of interest, 3-4%, whatever it is. But in the US, the average interest rate paid to savers is less than half of 1%. And that's just standard. Yeah, so in the US, the banks take all the margin and they pay very little to depositors, way worse than in Australia. And so the Bank of America CEO actually said that if crypto companies can offer yield to client deposits in cryptocurrency and on stablecoins, that he said up to $5 trillion of cash could flee the traditional banking system. And so there's this huge fight right now between the banks and the crypto companies. And luckily,
I usually say that one of the reasons the Clarity Act hasn't gone through, amongst a few other things, and all the issues we have here in Australia of people trying to move around, as it's, and I'm sure it's happened to you, James, where we try and do a transfer, it gets declined. You know, we get a phone call from the bank. Are you being told to move this money? Very dodgy, actually. But one of the things I have said constantly, and whether we like it or not, one of the reasons that Clarity Act doesn't get passed, one of the reasons regulation isn't a thing or isn't more than it should be, is because of that. Is because we're taking away the bank's play money. Let's be honest, they do with our money what they want. They charge a 10% fee. In the US, I didn't realize it was that low, 0.5% of what they're charged. That's crazy.
If you could, wind the clock back 8 years or however long you've been in digital assets, and you had one piece of advice that you could give to somebody listening to this now who's, relatively new to investing in crypto, what would it be?
Buy Bitcoin and hold.
I wasn't expecting that, actually. I was thinking of much more
deep and meaningful.
No, but I actually love that. That's so succinct and brilliant. Okay, and where can people go to find out more about what Nani Crypto does, and where can they get some educational materials to help them?
So Nani Crypto there's a few different ways. We actually do one-on-one sessions, we do corporate sessions, workshops, and of course we're on all over social media. So if you look up Nani Crypto on most platforms, you'll find me. Just be very careful, because unfortunately right now we're sitting at about 60-70 fake accounts on TikTok. So if you can follow me when I'm live, even better. But there is a Linktree Nani Crypto link, which hopefully I'll be able to put around somewhere on this video, maybe in the comments. So make sure you go there, be able to follow me on all socials. And very interestingly enough, which kind of ties up with our podcast, James, I've actually got a 20% discount on all bookings and courses going right now. We started on International Women's Day, so it is there, and it will be running until the 31st of March for anyone who's interested in booking a session or getting started with one of our courses.
Fantastic. Well, what a good offer. And thank you so much for your time, Donna. Great to speak with you today, and look forward to chatting again. Probably before that 5-year mark when Bitcoin hits 500K, hopefully. But I really want to touch base and see if that comes true. So
absolutely, James. Thank you so much for your time. Great to catch up with you today.
Thanks.